my great honour to welcome you all.
It is a very prestigious award. It means the world to me.
They have great senses of humour.
I like to reveal parts of history to them, for I love making history come alive.
They are some of the best people that you can come across.
To help them open their hearts.
I always come back to this quote. How can we be role models to learners if we're not learners ourselves?
It's quite useful to get out of our bubbles, not our COVID ones, and sort of see what else is out there.
By sharing best practice, we can see the whole picture. We can see what really matters.
One of the biggest brains around.
It's easy to forget how much has to happen behind the front lines.
As a global schools group, Cognita educates over 55,000 students across 12 countries. We're proud to be Wellbeing Partner at this year's Festival of Education, and we want to share the work that we're doing to prioritise children's well-being. This starts with a clear understanding of what well-being is. We looked at the evidence and created a simple Be Well charter that everyone can use day to day. It gives a clear definition of well-being and then focuses on the specific contributors that influence it. Discover our full Be Well charter video and other resources to use with your students and families at cognita.com.
I really try to not look at myself as just a science teacher. I feel like as a teacher, it's very important to help students grow and develop outside of your lessons. A single teacher believing in you and really believing in you. One teacher doing that can have a large impact, but if you have one or two or three all telling you that and really, really believing in it, it makes you feel like you can achieve anything in the world, honestly.
Welcome to this Festival of Education keynote session, part of the annual Festival of Education, taking place online from the 16th to the 30th of June. This year's festival is free for all teachers and educationalists across education in the UK and beyond. This has only been possible thanks to the support of our incredible partners. A huge thank you to our headline partner, Pearson, our festival partners, BBC Bitesize, Cognita and Teach First, our literary festival partner, Bloomsbury Publishing, and our organising partner, Wellington College, the home of the Festival of Education. We'd also like to thank our incredible speakers. Over 200 leading educationalists and thought leaders will be providing sessions at this year's festival. On behalf of the audience and organisers, thank you. It's time to sit back and get set for our upcoming keynote session. If you wish to ask a question during this session, please head over to our Slido page to submit questions and vote for your favourites. Enjoy this Festival of Education keynote session.
Hello. Hello, I'm Vivian Porritt and I'm speaking on behalf of the whole Women Ed community, nearly 40,000 of us, and we're really delighted you're joining us this evening because we are this evening all about disruption to the processes that are holding women leaders back in education. And we want to share what we can do to innovate and change the status quo and how we can bring about and make the change that is needed. So I'm going to share with you first what Women Ed is about to make sure we're all on the same page and ready to disrupt, and then we'll introduce everybody joining us. So we are about empowering more women in education to have a choice to progress on their leadership journey. And a woman's leadership journey tends to be more up, down, sideways, off, back on than the more traditional, in brackets, male leadership journey. And there are barriers to the nature of that leadership journey. And we're a values-driven organisation, and there we have our 8 C's. And we're particularly focused this evening on challenge and change. And we really want to inspire you to think about the changes you can make as a leader and as an individual woman. We have 4 specific campaigns that feed into the kind of disruption we think the status quo needs. And we're going to be exploring each one of these in our conversation this evening and looking for how we can suggest ways forward, very practical, straightforward strategies. We want to reduce the gender pay gap. We're going to advocate for flexible working, and we want to see women represented in leadership roles according to the percentage of the workforce. Women dominate the education workforce, and yet leadership is very much led by men. So we want to bring about disruption to change this. And so we need all allies in education to help with this. Women Ed is an inclusive organisation, and we have some fabulous male allies who support what we do and who put into practice some of the things we'll talk about this evening. So we think everybody working in education wants equal rights, wants fairness, wants justice. And so if you're a he for she, we really think this is a session that's going to be useful and helpful to you, as well as individual women. We work through our networks, and we've got 35 networks in over 20 countries. We've just had quite a few new ones, several in Canada, and the new Women Ed network is Women Ed Thailand. And we're just wanting to give you a bit of a sense. It's going too fast for me. We just want to give you a bit of a sense of where our networks are located, all the way from the US and Canada over through to Australia, and all points in between nearly. We're not yet on every continent, so that's definitely an aim for us in the next few years. We wanted to show you that because the issues we're talking about today here in the Festival of Education, based from Wellington in England, these are global issues. These are what very many women are dealing with. And we're all together working out how to make differences and how to change the practices that are holding women back. We've got examples there of our impact, and I don't want to take you through all of those because we'll be talking about them as we go through. But our partnerships in particular now are really focused on how a partner can help us with those 4 campaigns. And I'm sure we'll get some examples of that in our conversation this evening. We also hope that you will find our 2 books helpful. Being 10% Braver was published in December, and 10% Braver is nearly 2 years old. I can't believe that from its first publication. There's a lot of the suggestions we'll talk about this evening had their genesis in 10% Braver. So we'd certainly recommend these 2 books to help you make the kind of disruptive processes that would be useful. Our website is there, and we are pretty much on all social media channels. And I'm sharing our theme there for this evening. We are about disruption, we are about innovation, and we want to make change. And we're looking forward to talking across the team that we've got together today. So it would be great if we can see the team now. Can we see everybody? Are we all live on the screen now? Where's our technical person? What do I need to do? Hi, technical support. Can we stop the PowerPoint? Pardon? Great. Okay, super. So, hello, good evening, everybody. We've got a fabulous team here, and Jules, one of our other global strategic leaders, is going to introduce everybody.
Hello, thank you, Vivian, and hello, everybody. My name is Jules Dorby. I am one of the co-founders and global strategic leads of Women Ed. And Vivian, who you've just heard talk, is another one of those of the co-founders. We've been together a long time now. We have, as is Kezia Featherstone. So also on the panel we have our 2 other global strategic leaders of Palm Plumber and Liz Free. So good to see them. And then our Women Ed England national leaders who have been doing a fantastic job lately. So for Women Ed, I've been seeing them on social media everywhere, which is great. Christala Jamil and Claire Price. So I'm really happy to have everybody here on the panel and looking forward to the conversation.
Excellent. So I'm assuming it's over to me now to talk about why we actually need to disrupt. So Vivian's kind of talked you through some of the campaigns that we are focusing on. And 6 years ago, when the founders of Women Ed, Vivian, Jules, and Kezia, to name just 3 of them, got together, they were trying to challenge the status quo. What they saw was a female-dominated profession with a leadership tier that was dominated by men, and that seemed inequitable. Fast forward to today, 6 years later, and there is still this issue that exists. So our first campaign is very much focused on making sure that we increase diversity and that diversity at the top levels. Our second campaign really focuses on intersection and the fact that if you add intersection to the mix, actually that problem becomes even worse. And what we see is that even though there's a shortage of female leaders in the system at present, when you add in ethnicity, when you add in sexuality and other factors as well, suddenly we're faced with an even bigger challenge. So all of this kind of just leads to the suggestion that we really do need to disrupt. We really do need to change. What are your thoughts, panel? What kind of, why do we need to change this, and what difference it makes? I know for me personally, if I don't see those role models in positions of power, I'm not going to be wanting to aspire to those positions. I'm never going to see myself in those roles. What are your thoughts?
I'll just jump in here. The school that I lead is in the West Midlands. It's in the Black Country. It's in Tipton. It's very wonderful. We have a very, very mixed demographic here, which I absolutely love. I've worked in some places where the demographic has been a little bit monochrome, but here we have approximately 30% of our children have an Afro-Caribbean heritage. We have around about 20% of a Southeast Asian. We have around 10% from Eastern Europe. We have a number from Africa, particularly North Africa, and obviously we have quite a large white working class demographic. For my children to raise their aspirations, for them to be ambitious, for them to want to, do better than their parents, and not in a bad way, because I know they love their parents and their parents love them, but for them to be able to find new opportunities, to perhaps be first generation university attenders, to find a job that their parents or their grandparents didn't do. And obviously it's quite an industrial area, and a lot of the jobs their parents and grandparents did are now going away. They're being sent to different countries. They're trades that are going out of fashion. In order to enable all of that, we need them to have some role models to look up to, particularly the girls. But not only the girls, we need them to see people that look like them. We need them to see women, we need them to see men, we need them to see people of colour, we need to see different religions, we need to see the different sexualities, we need to see people with disability. We need to see them all the way throughout the school population, represented in the staff, but also particularly in the leadership teams, both middle leaders and senior leaders. I'm very lucky I have a very sort of diverse senior leadership team, partly by luck, but also partly by design. And we work very, very hard to be a very visible presence, both in school and in the community. And I think that is something that's really important. So, it's a value that I hold very closely, and you have to go out of your way to make that happen.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the the fact that about a third of our secondary schools and a third of our primary schools have students that identify as BAME, just to take that as one aspect of diversity, that's a lot of pupils out there who are not seeing that representation in their leadership teams. Kristala, you work in London. You've got perhaps the most diverse leadership in the country, perhaps. Is that true?
Well, I agree. The population, the communities that we serve are predominantly African or Afro-Caribbean. There are more other ethnicities coming at the moment into my school, so we're getting more Turkish, Eastern European, but predominantly African and Afro-Caribbean. And I think throughout the pandemic, one thing that caught my eye was there was an article, I don't know if you saw it in The Guardian, that made an assumption that, all our community are baristas or work in the city as cleaners. And I think our fight is to challenge that perspective, to show that actually that's not true. And here in Tottenham, we're proud of our children's achievements. We're proud of our community's achievement. We're a little bit fed up of the stereotypical compartment that Tottenham seems to be placed in. So what Kezia is saying about, amplifying that and just seeing life through different perspectives, and children, students, even members of our community seeing and celebrating those successes. I think we're a little bit tired of being backstage, and we want to bring that to the front stage for everybody to celebrate with us appropriately. It's not an add-on, this is our life. And Haringey is doing a huge amount of work with schools to change that perspective, to make things happen. I think we've started the journey and there's a long way to go, but at least there's acknowledgement that change needs to happen. I think that's one step, and our borough's kind of managing that really well.
Thank you. I mean, one question that we haven't really asked is why it matters. Why do we need to do this? What are the benefits of more diverse teams? Does anyone want to come in on that one? Claire?
Just want to say, what a waste of talent when we've got young people from every diversity that you can imagine, including disability, which is one of the ones that we've forgotten, who we are really educating well, that we're getting them off at the very beginning of their journey in life. We're absolutely getting them right. And then we're suddenly letting it stop. And we're letting it stop because we've got a male-centric view and an ableist-centric view and a white-centric view and a straight-centric view about what actually good leadership looks like or what people look like. And we're part of our absolute mission should be to say that just because it's always looked like that doesn't mean it always has to look like that. And if we as educators can't do it, and if we as educators can't model it in our schools, and if we as educators can't be singing from the rooftops that actually this is what difference looks like, and difference makes better. It's not a shadow of or a lesser version of. It can make better. And combined forces, we're not saying that white straight men shouldn't be leaders. We're actually saying combining everybody together will make the greatness that we need. And I think if we can't fight for that in our schools and we can't fight for that within our staff, then probably we're looking in the wrong places to save the problems of the world.
Yay! Disruption! Disruption!
Well said, Claire. That's excellent. I think it's a perfect time at this point to move on to Liz. So Liz, over to you. What are our other campaigns, and how else can we disrupt?
Thank you, Palm. I have to say, so I'm in Switzerland calling. So I'm in the middle of a major thunderstorm. So if you hear claps of thunder and lightning, don't be too alarmed. So we've already hit sort of 2 of our major campaigns. The third campaign that we look at is advocating for flexible working practices. So I kind of did just a bit more work around this to think about what does this look like globally and what does it look like in the UK specifically. So to give you an idea as an example, in the UK, the proportion of teachers that are working part-time, if we look at men, in 2018, that was 9%, against other professions where it's sitting at around 13%. Not only that, but the proportion of women in education working part-time was 29% against all other professions at 41%. And what do we know about education? Whether you're in the UK, whether you're in America, Switzerland, all around the world, what we see is massive attrition. We see teachers entering the profession, and we see particular attrition in those early years, and then we see them at the midpoint career. And who are most affected by that? Well, women. And so we see amazing teachers with the life experience and the pedagogical experience, and we lose them. Sometimes we lose them from leadership as they decide, for whatever reason, that flexible working works better for their particular circumstances. And so we have this idea somehow that flexible working does not link with leadership. And Claire was just talking about representations and ideas around what a great leader is. And so at Women Ed, we're really thinking about how can we give examples and case studies that show that there are many different types of leadership. There are very many different ways of leading. And we need our young people to see that. We look at some of the McKinsey reports that look into this particular area about aspirations of career entry, people both in education and beyond. And one of the things they pick out as to why women are actually more aspirant when they enter their careers post-university. And yet, sorry, that's lightning and thunder going on behind me. Can you hear it? I don't know if you can, but it's going mad here. Stay focused, Liz. I just have to tell everybody it's my last day of term tomorrow. I know everyone in Britain is like, what? Yeah, I go back on the 1st of August. So if I'm slightly incoherent, it's that time of year. So McKinsey, what they identified was one of the things that early career women said particularly was that they didn't see themselves in the representations of leadership that they saw. The idea that if you want to be a head teacher, a director, a CEO, that you can have no life. Well, Today is probably not the day to ask me about that. However, in a couple of weeks, of course there is life. I have 2 children. I balance my own life. Do I work hard? Yes, of course I do. Is it an all-consuming job? Yes, it is. But it's a profession, and there's great joy in what we do. And so I want to show my way of leading, but I want to see other people's way of leading, so that our young people, when they're coming in and when they're coming into the profession, whether that's teaching or other careers, that they can see a place for themselves. And so the idea of flexible working, I made a correlation to part-time work, but of course it's much more than part-time working. We really want to work on that and try and make sure that we realize the potential of everyone in the profession, and we do not have attrition of great teachers. Not only that, but the other area that we are looking at specifically is the gender pay gap. Now, Vivian has done a huge amount of work in this field. I'm sure she'll give us more data in a moment. But I like to look at it from the international perspective from here in Switzerland. And one of the things that I look at quite a lot is the data around international schools, because that's the field that I work in as CEO and director of an international school. And one of the things that we've identified, and it's actually fairly representative of many domestic systems, and I'll just give you some of the data here, because it's pretty terrible, to be honest. CIS, so that's the Council of International Schools, they found that in international schools, that's all across the world, that 69% of school heads are male. And the average net salary for males is over $15,000 higher than females, exactly like for like. So that's number of years in teaching and number of years in what they call administration. In the British sector, we'd call that leadership. It always bothers me. I'm like, it's not admin. Who thought that admin was leadership? Anyway, we'll move on from that. $15,000 difference. Exactly the same level of experience. Exactly, I know, exactly the same number of years in administration. So it means that women get paid 11.7% less for exactly the same. That's the most recent data. Not only that, but they also identify this massive differential between the different countries and different regions. Average salaries are highest in North America. Good to know if anybody wants to go and take a bit of a career move in our global profession. Lowest salaries are in Africa. And we have to think about what is the implication about equity, global equity in education. And the pay gap is one of these things. Not only that, and this is the kicker really, and this comes back to Palm's point, 78% of heads are white. Let's just think about this as global data, so that doesn't make any sense at all. And the average salary for white people is over $21,000 more than for non-white people. Again, exactly like for like, number of teaching years, number of administration years. So the question is why do we need to disrupt? You know, what do we need to disrupt? Why do we need to disrupt? And what can we do to affect a change in both of these areas? So flexible working in maintaining and keeping our profession active and engaged, and us utilizing the expertise, and the pay gap where we need equity, not because it's just morally right, but also the socioeconomic impact of not paying our leaders what they should rightly deserve. Over to you, ladies.
Oh, well, I've got to go first on that last point, haven't I? In terms of what's wrong, because that's what we're talking about, why we're going to need to change, it is immoral. Surely it's unethical, it's inequitable, and it's immoral. And as leaders of schools, leaders look at their budget sheets. You can see the gender pay gap in the budgets. So can trustees and governors. So schools and larger trusts know what is happening there. And in England, any organisation over 250 employees has got to do their gender pay gap this October. There's been a pause last year and a 6-month delay this year, but you've got until October to do it. And there are significant gender pay gaps in our own schools and in our own multi-academy trusts. And I hope every woman listening looks up the gender pay gap of their organisation, and then they'll have the same look on their face that Liz had when she was describing the size of that gap. Overall in England, the gender pay gap in education is the third worst out of all sectors. We're up there with construction and mining, and we duke it out as to whether we're third or fourth. Come on. I joined a profession that I thought was equitable and about social justice. And it's not equitable in the way we treat our women leaders. I'm going to shut up there, otherwise I'll explode.
Don't shut up. Don't ever shut up. I'm just going to echo what you just said, because one of the first things I did when I took on I just think we lead by example, don't we?
Yeah.
Some of what you're saying is so pertinent to my current setting. So the first thing I did, and it might, I don't know, people say it's because I took on the schools during a pandemic and I had more time. No, it isn't. It's because it's ethical. It's immoral not to. So the first thing I did was look at salaries, look at genders, look at roles, and tidy that, and had to make changes because it was immoral not to, just within the staff I have. And Claire and I are talking a little bit more about it and how coaching helps to identify that, so that we're not just, we're not just talking about it, we're living it, we're breathing it, we're making it happen. And we're going to go into a little bit more depth, aren't we, Claire, tomorrow? Just nod so that I know you're with me. But I think as leaders, where we are in these positions and when these biases, where this continues, is because we're ignoring that. And I think the tightening of our budgets is allowing that to happen, and it's got to stop. We've got to prioritise that. So don't ever shut up. I'm here to amplify you.
Can I just say that if we actually want to talk equity and social justice, and if we are really going to be absolutely nailed on he for she, actually the benefits of making sure that every single woman in your workplace and every single person of colour in your workplace is adequately paid, and paid at least to the same level as every other person in the organisation for the same job and the same experience, then we all benefit from it. Because actually one of the other things from the pandemic is about the additional workload on women who are working in both domestic and workplace sphere. But that then, when we go into post-pandemic and men want to play more part in the raising of their children, or we want to be able to make sure that there's shared parental leave, or we want to make sure that gay couples with children are able to share the burden well about what raising a family is. And let's face it, some of us may choose not to have children, but without children, we haven't got a job when, in 20 years. But if we want the society that looks like that, and I believe we do, then actually we need to make sure that we pay well. And we start by making sure we do it in our organisations, or we start by making sure we challenge when it's not in our organisations.
I think that's a really fair point, Claire, that you make there, because the whole kind of, the whole shift to modern Britain, what do we mean by modern Britain? How does that reflect what's going on in our schools? Because it absolutely has to, doesn't it? It absolutely has to reflect what children, what young people are seeing as they grow up, because otherwise, how are we going to change those perspectives? And in Pride Week, this feels like such an important conversation to be having.
And it's interesting because there are crossovers between advocating for flexible working practices and the gender pay gap. And a significant issue in the gender pay gap is the number of women who are paid less because of their reduction in hours if they choose to have domestic responsibilities. So a massive thing we've got to disrupt is what goes on between partners in domestic relationships and why the load always falls on the woman. That might be our next campaign over the next 25 years, but these are our campaigns for now, aren't they? And Kezia, now that we've talked about all the campaigns, is going to start a conversation about what do we need to do about this? In what way do we need to innovate? How can we innovate so that we do bring about the change?
Thank you, Vivian. And I think it is absolutely essential that we start thinking about these things in a different way, because certainly when I came into school working, it feels a very long time ago now, and actually I think it's nearly 30 years ago. Things have changed, but they change very slowly. And actually my fear is over the last few years, they've slipped backwards, and particularly for some of our staff during the pandemic, things have slipped backwards. And obviously that ties into the campaigns that we've talked about. But we have to think very differently. Not only our own thinking as individuals, but the institutional thinking, the way that things have always been done. The number of times I hear people say, well, I can't do that, or we can't do that because, or it's always been done this way and therefore, or I'm just this sort of person, or I'm just a woman, or I'm just part-time, or I'm just an NQT, or I'm just returning from maternity leave, or, you know, all sorts of things that act as barriers. So we have to think, how are we actually going to think differently in order to bring about these changes and bring about them quickly? Because, you know, I mean, we've all seen that meme of that really old lady with the big sign up saying, I'm sick of protesting this shit. We've been doing this forever. OK, and, you know, she was probably doing it when she was a kid, and she probably took over from her grandmother. And we've been doing this for decades and centuries. And how far through are we? Well, in this country, in Britain, we're still the third or fourth worst industry for a gender pay gap. How has that happened? How has mining, you know, got you know, something comparable to education? Shouldn't we be? What, you know, we need to be better. I'm angry, and we need to make it better. But we need to think about things in a different way. You know, I could sit here in Tipton, it's sunny, we've got no thunderstorms yet, and I could go, do you know what, I'm all right, and, you know, it's fine. But it isn't for a lot of people, and I think actually the journey's getting harder. It's becoming more challenging. And like we've talked about before, when intersectionality plays a part, if you are a woman and you're black, it's not a glass ceiling, it's a concrete ceiling. You just keep banging your head. And I've seen that with colleagues that I've worked with. They are brilliant and they're ready for the next step, and they're not being given it. And it's breaking their spirit, and we're going to lose them from the profession. So I'm going to ask you, how do we change this cycle of bad, limiting thinking that's holding everybody back? Does anyone want to go first?
I'll start on a systems level, and then everybody else can come in and bring me right back down to earth. I think for each and every person in the audience and who might watch us elsewhere, it starts by looking at what does it look like in your organisation. The increasing growth of MATs means that there's increasing men in charge, and men in charge leading their image. And if you look at the gender pay gap again across the biggest MATs, you'll see it's massive. In the medium size, it's massive, and they recruit in their image. And it's up to us to start to make that challenge. It's up to us to be reflecting back to the DFE or through our professional associations and unions to be saying, let's ask these questions. It's up to us to start saying, why does leadership have to look like this? And when we have the debates, and this is one of the things which makes me sad really about teacher workload and teacher retention, it's always in the basis of, is it about too much marking? Are we asking this? Is the accountability schedule right? Actually, have we got our whole basis of what we think leadership and teaching is just wrong? We should be a beautiful profession, making young minds unfurl at the speed at which they are ready to unfurl, and we should be doing it with people who are refreshed enough to do it. And if our working conditions and our 1265, if we're teaching in the UK, means that people are too tired to have children and a job, or they're not the right colour to be a leader and be able to progress in their life, we've got to ask those questions. And it's a systems level. It's not, we can all individually do things, and I'll be talking about that later, I'm sure, but at a systems level, we should be standing up and saying, this is just not okay. And together, we won't be the people with the signs on our back in the future. We should be the people going, yep, we're done with protesting this shit because we've made a difference.
Brilliant. Okay, more disruptive thinking. I'm going to do a big applause for Claire there. Any more disruptive thinking?
I want to pick up on the point that Claire talked about, talking about networks and the power of networks. Obviously, we're quite significant in there, but there are lots of other networks that leaders can get involved with, or women can get involved with, in order to be those disruptors, because, you know, that's where it's going to make a difference. And that network, that connection that people can have with each other, it can be really, really powerful in terms of that support network. I know that ever since I've joined Women Ed, I have found it such a comforting hug of a group. And that network has really supported me to achieve some of the aims that I perhaps never thought I would, or perhaps never envisaged. I've also become more aware, and that awareness is driving that desire for social justice that I think we've been talking about. So if people aren't aware of those issues, then they're not going to act, they're not going to disrupt. So I think that education, be as vocal as we can, basically. Let's go out and shout it from the rooftops, because without that, we're never going to get people involved and they're still going to be sitting there with their signs on.
And that absolutely, Pam, that's why we wrote 10% Braver, first of all, in the hope that we would reach more women than we would ordinarily do on Twitter. And it certainly had that impact. But it's also enlightened women to the barriers that we've all learned and how it works. And we get so many messages on Twitter and on email saying literally, right, I'm womaning the barricades, I'm staffing the barricades, we're all on those barricades together. What can we do? And I think that's important, to give people examples of things they can do systemically, but also organisationally and personally. I think those are our key challenges that we want to explore.
Absolutely.
Can I just add that there are two things I'd like people to do when you talk about that, Vivian, from the kind of systemic side and the personal side. Firstly, I want everyone listening to go and ask their HR to take their previous pay off application forms. We've been talking about that for years. I've done it in my own school. It's made no difference to my recruitment in terms, I don't look at it. I don't care about that. I want the best people that I can have for the job, and I'll pay them very well for doing it, and fairly and equitably. The second thing is I want anyone listening that's moving or coming back to work, anything at that incremental point of change, which you talk about, Vivian, with the pay gap, is that's the point where we see the difference. Do not assume that it's equitable. Do not assume that because there's a pay scale in place, that therefore everyone's treated the same. And so you've got to be a bit savvy and come in with knowing your own worth and be willing to prospect. So if you're coming into a new leadership position, don't just feel grateful because they like you. Although I felt that when someone's offered me a job. Come back in with, okay, that's great, but what about this? And you can negotiate on pay, on package. Internationally, of course, you can negotiate on lots of other aspects of this, but really start to think of yourself more than just what people offer you. That's it. That's all I got.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I think the call is there. Let's not be too polite about this. Let's do this in a very disruptive way, because things have got to change, and they've got to change quickly. I'm going to hand over to Christella now, who is going to talk a little bit about what more is needed.
Thank you, Kezia. Thank you, everyone on the panel. I think this panel and the entire Women Ed community really do set out to define new rules and the responsibilities that lie on each of us here. We expect to make mistakes, we'll make amends, we'll make leaps, we'll not only break, we'll smash. But we don't just subscribe to Women Ed. We are Women Ed, and the things that have been said here, sometimes it's a cultural thing. It's the way we're brought up. It's the way that we feel we need to behave that is our own personal barrier. And like Kezia said, it's time to disrupt and not be polite. It's that time now, because even when women demonstrate strength or ambition or resilience, or the daily battles we have with microaggressions, especially expectations and assumptions that are formed by the stereotypes that racism can bring about to us, we're always pushed down. I think we need to be creating environments that foster not only more women, a variety of styles of leadership, in which diverse racial, ethnic, gender identities are seen as just as professional as what's here currently. I think along with our 4 campaigns, the underrepresentation of women in leadership and the other campaigns in education, there is systematic inequality, but it needs to be as big an issue for men as it is for women. I think things that we want to change, like if we look at a starting point, perhaps we need a more equitable and flexible approach to recruitment, to retention, to professional development. Perhaps we need to change the mindset of motherhood equals time out to motherhood equals a skill set in. There are so many ways about discussing what we can change on sort of a personal basis from our experiences. But my question is, and through coaching, we do that in Women Ed. We disrupt coaching because it's not always about promotion, about bettering ourselves. It's about bettering ourselves and the people around us. So when one woman opens the door for herself, she's walked the walk, she does it for the rest. So my question to the panel is, how can we do that? What are we asking here to happen? How have you seen change happen and where it's been successful? Because I think a lot of my learning and successes have been when I felt uncomfortable, when I've done what Liz has said and I think, oh my God, I need the courage to do that. I'm going to ask for more. And I think that's where my best learning and successes have come.
Oh, that absolutely, Christella. And I'm just going to elaborate on Liz's point then about the change that's needed in just a small section of an application form. Personally, I rip up every application form anybody uses at the moment and start again, because what we're actually getting through our current recruitment process is what leadership currently looks like. Yeah. So it's all got to be blown apart.
Yeah.
But I want to start with that question on the application form, as Liz said, about what's your current salary. What would be really brave and really disruptive is just don't answer it. Just ignore it. And don't ask it when you're asking another person's school for the reference. Don't get rid of it, because it ensures that women's pay is less than men for the same job. And when we've asked this on Twitter several times, we've had some great responses. We've had several men leading trusts who've just got straight on the phone to their HR department and said, get rid of it. Because once you ask that question, nobody can tell me why it's there.
And not all, you're right, and not all MATs have their own HR, and some MATs go into boroughs. So can you imagine if every borough nationwide took this on? Just one thing, what won't harm them, you're just taking it off the application form, you're taking it off the reference request. So I just think small things can be very big achievements for women.
It would be huge. Yeah, it would be absolutely huge. What else do we want then?
If we're thinking just applications right now and think about what Liz was speaking about in terms of career trajectories, when people take time out, flexible working, and it's caring as well as child rearing quite frequently, and that almost always falls to women. Actually, think of that bit when we are recruiting that talks about career history. Because the traditional trajectory is job promotion, job promotion, job promotion, very male, nothing else has happened, and other people have moved around the country or whatever. For me, take that out, use it for safer recruiting, but don't actually use it as part of your selection. And if you need it as part of your selection, ask what you're selecting for and why you're selecting for that.
And you come back to purpose, don't you, there? What are we doing this for?
Yeah, always, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you can, all those details about career history, etc., even what bloody university you went to, they can all be done by taking that, by putting all of those points on a separate sheet of paper, and whoever is scrutinizing the applications first, they just check that somebody's got the essential requirements, and they give the personal statement over to the panel. They say, these people meet the requirements, now decide. All of those things otherwise are there to influence the unconscious bias we all have anyway. Kezia.
Yeah, I'm just going to add a couple of thoughts in here. As somebody who was once fed back to about why I wasn't shortlisted by a school because of the university I attended, bless their cotton socks.
Which is not on the person spec that you have to go to this university.
No, but yes, there's all sorts of unconscious bias going on there. She must be dead rough. She only went there. I probably am dead rough, but never mind. I don't mind that too much. What I was going to say is, I mean, we've been advertising for a couple of positions recently, and somebody they normally just chat with me. Are you okay with this? And it's like, well, yeah, it's that job description, it's that person spec. And actually, I don't often double check these things now because I'm quite busy, but when I opened the job description and the person spec, God, it was old. It was in some sort of Word, 95 or something. Actually, not only was the formatting incredibly old, it was in Times New Roman, which is a baddie for me, as you know, but there was, the vocabulary about the job description, the vocabulary about the person spec, I just thought it's going to alienate loads of people. Why are we not putting in, I can understand some things are essential, but where it's desirable, what about real world application? What about understanding, the way things work, not necessarily within a school, if you've always had your career in a school? How can we review all of those documents that we use to recruit the next generation at every level, from midday supervisor to the head teacher? What can we do just to change the vocabulary in order to disrupt it a little?
Don't perpetuate systemic disadvantage. I think that is what we are trying to say. It would be a massive change, but a small step.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think on that note, I will hand over to my partner in crime here, Claire. It's your turn to shine.
Well, my part of this is to say, what do we all think that anybody watching this could do to make a difference? So we've talked in big terms and broad brush strokes, about what we've done or what we think people could do. So uncharacteristically, I'm going to be quite quiet and I'm going to ask each of you to say, what can the audience or what can other people do to get involved and to speed up changes? So I'm going to start with you, Palm.
Oh, right. One thing. I think, it goes back to Liz's point, know your own worth. I think if you are clear about your value and what you're worth in world, you can be that 10% braver person, and you can step up and you can challenge the status quo in your own organization, but also elsewhere. And I think that really ultimately it ties in with our values, doesn't it? That confidence that we want to see from people, and the confidence that the network gives. So that would be my suggestion. Just know your own value, know your own worth.
Lovely. I absolutely love that. Love you. Know who you are and what you're worth. Christella, do you want to come in?
Just thinking, just moving on from that, it's kind of channeling self-doubt into positive motivation. So once you eradicate that self-doubt, that's when the party begins. That's where we disruptors come in and we make those changes. So I think we're kind of the eyes of Women Ed here at the moment, but we're always the voice. And now we need to be united action. So it's kind of my bit.
Lovely. I'm loving solidarity. Liz, do you want to come in?
Yes, the thunder stopped, so that's good news. What I would really appeal for is for advocacy, is to, if everyone who is listening today saw something in their colleagues in the next couple of weeks and mirror that back to them. Because when we're talking about that self-belief, often we don't see in ourselves what other people do. And so I would say to advocate and raise each other up, and it doesn't matter what gender you are, to be able to do that and to see that in a colleague and start to recognize the strengths that they have and build their self-awareness so that when the right role or some new opportunity comes along, they see themselves as being able to or having the potential to do that. So recognize and value the people around you.
Very lovely. I love that. Advocacy. It's not a C, but it ought to be if we could find a one to make it add to our values. Kez?
I'm just going to say stop putting up with rubbish. And that's me sanctioning myself so I don't say anything worse. Don't put up with it for yourself, but also don't put up with it for other people. Do not walk past things that you would not accept or you shouldn't accept. You know, there've been a few times in my past career where I've let myself be treated quite badly, and I think I was just scared of what would happen if I stood up for myself. Well, I don't think it would be any worse than what happened when I didn't stand up for myself. So regardless of whether you are beginning your career and maybe you haven't even started training yet, it's all your pre-summer fun, or whether you're 6 months away from retirement, like I will be when I win the lottery tomorrow, just stand up for yourself, stand up for others, and stop putting up with the rubbish.
Fantastic. I'm loving this empowering speech, actually so inclusive, absolutely brilliant. Vivian, would you like to finish off our What Can Everybody Do?
A very quick one. If you have a woman who is working part-time on a leadership role, pay her the full teaching learning responsibility payment. Don't ask her to do the full job for prorated pay. Have to change that. And I think it's over to Jules now, who's going to sum up for us. Are you there, Jules?
You know what? I haven't seen Jules for a while. Did she vanished?
I think she might have done.
Yeah, I think she might have as well. But I've got a few questions from the audience here
that
have come in. So let's talk about them. So the first one is talking about the impact of COVID on women in terms of their access to learning, development, and becoming leaders. We talked a little bit about that, haven't we? Is there anything anyone wants to say on the impact of COVID on women becoming leaders?
I think in terms of what's happening in the UK, COVID has amplified disadvantage everywhere. And part of the disadvantage women have is in becoming leaders. And I think where society's become a little bit shaky or a little bit out of balance, the danger is that we revert back to what we know and what is comfortable. And that is exactly what we're trying to gauge against. So if I was to say anything for people in the audience about what is the impact on women being leaders, well, why don't you all go out and make 57 applications overnight to become a leader? Apply for those leadership courses, because we are the change and we make the change. And COVID's been dreadful and it's knocked everyone back. But actually, if we stand together, stand up, know our worth, we'll all do great things.
That was brilliant, Claire. What a statement. Okay, another one. And this is from Sean. She's saying, how can male leaders become better role models for women to enable them to become disruptors, innovators, and change makers? We've alluded a little bit to he for she, but what else could they do?
They need to stop being dickheads. Some of them are. And they just need to be better. I mean, you know, be a decent human being. I suppose I could also say that about women. Just be decent. Understand that not everybody lives your life. That there are different experiences. They're all valued. And stop just tapping people that look like you on the shoulder and suggesting they go for the next job. Look around you. Have a wider gaze. Look at the horizon. Sorry, I'm quite angry tonight. I do apologise to everybody.
Do you think of training, kind of, I guess, unconscious bias or bias training, something like that, diversity training?
Absolutely. Everybody needs to go on a course.
Can I also talk about being sort of self-reflective and really thinking about who are you listening to? So who are you hearing from? Whose voice are you hearing from? So when you're going about the day-to-day job as a head or a director, and you're just going at this pace all of the time, start to think about that percentage bias and see if that's proportionately representing the community that you serve. I think that's a really practical thing that you can start to do and really understand, where are you just hearing the loudest voices and who are they?
Yeah, absolutely. That point, that loudest voices often are those ones that get represented and get reflected, and that kind of can have significant impact on women, particularly when women aren't always able to be those voices because they're busy doing other things, aren't they, in life?
They are, and I'm afraid our time is very, very nearly up. Wonderful people. We just want to remind you, and this would be great for a male ally to join in with, that we're here all day tomorrow with 5 sessions related to exactly this theme, ways in which we can disrupt, innovate and make change. So it would be fabulous if you could continue and join in the conversation tomorrow in more detail with 5 times 50-minute workshops. Thanks very much, everybody. We're delighted you joined us this evening. And from us, we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Thank you very much, everybody. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's my great honour to welcome you all.
It is a very prestigious award. It means the world to me.
They have great senses of humour.
I like to reveal parts of history to them, for I love making history come alive.
They are some of the best people that you can come across.
To help them open their hearts.
I always come back to this quote. How can we be role models to learners if we're not learners ourselves?
It's quite useful to get out of our bubbles, not our COVID ones, and sort of see what else is out there.
By sharing best practice, we can see the whole picture. We can see what really matters.
One of the biggest brains around.
It's easy to forget how much has to happen behind the front line.
As a global schools group, Cognita educates over 55,000 students across 12 countries. We're proud to be Wellbeing Partner at this year's Festival of Education, and we want to share the work that we're doing to prioritise children's well-being. This starts with a clear understanding of what well-being is. We looked at the evidence and created a simple Be Well charter that everyone can use day to day. It gives a clear definition of well-being and then focuses on the specific contributors that influence it. Discover our full Be Well charter video and other resources to use with your students and families at cognita.com.
I really try to not look at myself as just a science teacher. I feel like as a teacher, it's very important to help students grow and develop outside of your lessons. A single teacher believing in you and really believing in you. One teacher doing that can have a large impact, but if you have 1 or 2 or 3 all telling you that and really, really believing in it, it makes you feel like you can achieve anything in the world, honestly.